Welcome to Unhinged Addiction Podcast. My name is Eric Zink, and I am your host. I go by the Mr. Impulsive online. This is episode 4, the right and wrong way of getting sober. I wanted to address this and have a podcast. And I'm going to actually probably have some guests eventually do podcasts on this also, because I love hearing all the different opinions and input on the right and wrong way to get sober, especially when you talk to people who are sober. It's amazing how many people are very passionate that there's like literally a right and wrong way of getting sober. I think that there is some truth behind it, but I also think that there's a lot of wrong behind it. I think that it's actually really dangerous to be saying that, hey, there is only one way to get sober. When it comes to my sobriety, I'm very open about it. Yes, I went to AA, I have went to NA, I have done the 12 steps. I have done that. I have worked at rehabs before. My opinion, flat out, I could save you a lot of time if you want to just know what my opinion is, and that is that there is no right or wrong way of getting sober. It's, I think, essentially your way to get sober. But I think there's also a lot of things to watch out for when getting sober, because when we're getting sober and you're newly, like you have decided that, dude, I don't want this life anymore. I want to get sober. I want to clean myself up. We're there mentally. I think we're really vulnerable. And that's something I don't think a lot of times, we take into account of how vulnerable we are. We're at rock bottom. So, we're in the middle of losing relationships. We're in the middle of either, lost a job or we're losing a job. We're in the middle of a lot. So I think we're very vulnerable at those times. And I think we can be taken advantage of a lot, which is the unfortunate thing. I think that, when we're getting sober, we almost feed people's egos that are already sober, that almost need their egos fed. And I mean that because I see a lot of sobriety coaches out there and, all of this of like the right and wrong ways, people, saying that, AA is the only way to do it, all this stuff, man. And man, I remember when getting sober, the hardest thing was I didn't know how to get sober. And AA, I felt like failed me a lot of times. I struggled. I tried getting sober from 23 to 36. At 23 years old is the first time I went to AA to get sober. And I was sober for a little over 30 days. And I relapsed because in this book I was reading, they told me to read these stories in the back of the book. And one of the stories was about the same situation as me. Husband losing his wife, losing his work, losing his kids, losing all this stuff. And he gets sober and they all come back and the wife comes back and the kids come back. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, that's how it is. This is so awesome. And my wife was pursuing more and more divorce, and I'm like, this isn't what this book had promised me. Like, I was told, like, if I get sober, essentially, that, like, my life gets better, and it's not getting better. I'm 23 years old, so I'm very young. I'm naive. I know that I have a problem. I know at 23 years old, I knew already I had a problem. Wasn't necessarily with cocaine at that time, but I did have a problem with alcohol. At that time, I was, like, driving home. I'd get 2 shooters. That's where I think my shooter thing started. I'd get 2 shooters of vodka, and then I'd get a 40 of King Cobra because it had a high alcohol content. And I drove every time home. It was like $5-6 or whatever for this, and became like a nightly ritual to me. Not a ton of alcohol, but it's enough alcohol. Like you shouldn't be doing shots and stuff every night. You shouldn't be drinking every night, but I was, and I knew I had an issue with it. And so here I am, everyone telling me, of course, go to AA, you got to get sober. And so I go there and I didn't relate to a lot of the people. I didn't know how to go to a meeting. Thankfully, I had a friend. His name was Jim. And Jim took me to the meetings. And it was scary at first. It was at a church. There wasn't a lot of people there. I'd never been to meetings before. Didn't know what to expect. And so I just started going. And I'd go once a week, I didn't do the 90 days and 90 meetings in 90 days. And my first experience with it was like not what I expected. I expected, I guess, like the world to shift for me and to bow down and be like, hey, good job, you're getting sober, hoorah. I expected just a celebration that I didn't get. In fact, my life just started getting worse, actually, because my divorce is now going forward with my soon-to-be ex-wife at that time. And I'm just watching a lot of stuff just start to crumble. And I figured, well, this isn't how you get sober. This doesn't work. And I ended up relapsing. And I had tried on and off since then to try and get sober. Always had a drinking problem, and cocaine was always throughout my life. At times it was really bad, and at times it was non-existent. It just kind of depended. But I always felt like there was like this one way, and if you didn't do it this way and this way didn't work for you, like too bad, you're not going to get sober. And I think a lot of people out there feel that way, that you feel like you're almost forced into this right or wrong way of getting sober. And that's the part that sucks. Everybody made such a big deal about like sobriety dates. And so I would write down my sobriety dates, and we download a bunch of apps. I mean, I downloaded a couple of apps. Soberly, I think, was the one app I ended up sticking with. And, I typed in my sobriety date and giving me words of motivation throughout the day. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of what it's about. And I would just keep failing. And I didn't know why. Like, I didn't understand why. And I was like, well, maybe it's just like not for me. Maybe I'm just not ready. Reality was I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to get sober. I'd never hit a point where it was like I truly fought to get sober. It wasn't even when I got sober this last time that I even truly fought for my sobriety until my dad killed himself. I didn't really want to get sober. I mean, that's the thing that I don't think people realize. Like, I got sober. I've been sober 7/25/17 is when I got sober. And I got sober to relapse. I mean, that was my intent on getting sober, was to relapse. I'm separating with my wife. She found out that I was cheating on her. My ex-wife now. Amber found out I was cheating on her. She found out I was sleeping with the receptionist and some other people. And I was like, I'm going to get sober because I figure I can get sober, kind of get my life back in order. Once my life's back in order, like I always did, after, 6 months, oh my God, life's hard, I relapse. Just go right back at it. That was my intent. That was my whole intent on getting sober. But I ended up sticking with it because my dad killed himself. My dad committed suicide, and I was 3 weeks sober. And I was going to meetings. I wasn't working any steps. I had a big book from back in the day, but I wasn't even bringing in my big book with me. Wasn't doing like anything, man. And I was going to meetings on Sundays only. And then if I was kind of struggling throughout the week, I'd go to a different, afternoon meeting throughout the week or on a day off if I had it. This was only for about 3 weeks though. And then my dad ended up committing suicide. And like, I was just in shock. And I guess I just kind of like latched on to everything I had of my dad before. Cause like I was talking to my dad about getting sober and going to AA and stuff. My parents were proud of me again, for the 100th time, like everybody else. Oh, you're getting sober again. Good job. I doubt that they even thought I'd stay sober too. I know I wasn't going to. And he ended up killing himself, and that's what I fought for it then. And you tell people that, and that's not like what you're like supposed to tell them almost. And like people kind of look at you like, well, it's not always, and they almost kind of brush over the fact that you were honest and real of like you didn't want to get sober. And like this, you have this really weird, messed up story on your sobriety if it doesn't fit the mold. And that's the one thing I think that people need to really be aware of, is that there is no right or wrong way, in my opinion, to get sober, whether it is AA, whether it's NA, whether it's going to inpatient treatment, outpatient treatment, therapy, therapists. Man, the funniest part is the biggest part of my sobriety, the biggest part of my whole sobriety was finding the right psychologist for my brain and my trauma, because of why I was self-medicating made a lot of sense all of a sudden. Learning of childhood trauma, abandonment trauma, my wife and dad committed suicide trauma. I'd never grieved any of this. Like, so finding out about trauma, getting into the right meds, and yes, I take Adderall. Just like a lot of people who are in NA and AA, they take, Xanax or whatever. They take SSRIs that also alter their brain, but they're sober. I'm not sober because I take 10 milligrams of Adderall in the morning and in the afternoon. And it's stuff like that I think that shies a lot of people away. Arkansas blows my mind. I got to give shouts out to Arkansas. That state has it down. I did a public speaking event there, and it was awesome to hear people like talking about, California sober and taking SSRIs and taking ADHD meds and staying sober with them. That they're very open-minded to realize that there's more than just NA and AA. And I'm not going to bash NA and AA nonstop. That's not what this podcast is about. Because NA and AA also gave me something. I wasn't very religious. I really struggled on the religious side. It gave me a place to go. It helped me form routine. It got me around other sober people and out of the house. I think isolating ourselves when getting sober is really, really bad. And so it got me out of the house. It got me around other sober people in a different environment. I got to hear other people speak. I got to relate to other people. So there's a lot of positivities that happened from it, but the 12 steps and stuff like that just didn't necessarily work for me because I got sober and I wasn't using, but I was angry still. Like, people will talk of like the term dry drunk, where you get sober but you don't do the 12 steps and you're angry and you still have all the habits of an addict. Well, I did the 12 steps and I did all of this, and I still had all the angry habits and habits that I had as an addict. Mine needed therapy, but it was never anything that was like pressed in AA at all. I really leaned towards AA a lot more than I did NA, and the reason that I leaned towards that is, like, I felt ashamed when I would go. I was a cocaine addict, and people would kind of be like, it was like a comparison, and I really struggle with that. I don't think it's healthy if you be around anybody, especially when you're getting sober. That's a comparison. People would be like, well, I was hooked on Percocets, or I was hooked on Oxy, or I was shooting up heroin, or whatever. And like every drug was worse, of course, than cocaine was. They're like, oh, you're a coke addict, whatever. I'm like, sorry, Becky, I wasn't sucking dick for a fucking shot of fucking heroin, man. Like, it was just insane, like how some people like would look at you weird of your cocaine habit versus their habit. I'm like, this is dumb. And I've started doing like a lot of mentoring. If you go to ericbzink.com, which is my website, I do one-on-one mentoring. I don't do any kind of sobriety coaching or anything like that, but I do mentoring, and I do a lot of them. And it's amazing how many coke addicts I've actually ran into, because coke addicts are a little odd. Like, they we're very successful, make a lot of money, but also you don't fit the mold of like trying to go to some of these meetings and stuff. And people are like looking at you like, okay, well, you're a business executive, you got Rolex and all this stuff, and you said you hit rock bottom, but you still have all this money. Like, there's this weird comparison. And so it was one of those that I really relate to a lot of the cocaine addicts I do one-on-ones with. If you want to do one, you can book them through ericbzink.com. There you go. There's a little slide of the website. But I do these one-on-ones, and everybody kind of talks the same. It's hard because we feel isolated with our drug of choice. And it's not even just cocaine. I know other users out there feel the same. Everyone that I've ever talked to has always kind of felt the same depending on what their drug of choice was. I know crystal meth addicts that kind of felt the same in all of this. And it's hard because you're struggling, you're new, trying to find people to relate. And there's people out there that you just don't relate to. And that's the hard thing of you find people out there that were doing like smash and grabs and breaking into cars, stealing wallets, buying lotto tickets with them, flipping the money, buying another bag, whatever it was, versus you have these functioning addicts. And so it's just part of, I think, trying to get sober is finding the people that you kind of relate to. And it's like panning for gold. You're looking for these little gold nuggets that people will share on tips and ways that they got sober that maybe you haven't tried yet. The biggest one for me is, eye-opener for me was actually at AA meeting. And it was 5 years into my sobriety, man. I was still struggling. And I went to a meeting, and I'm sobbing in this meeting, and I'm getting my 5-year chip crying. Like, I don't know what's going on, dude. Like, I didn't fucking know, man. I was crying. And I'm like, this sucks, dude. I'm 5 years sober, and like, I'm still self-sabotaging. I'm still all of this. And it's amazing that it took 5 years into my sobriety to find this. And this is a meeting I'd been to multiple times too, even in Idaho. And I asked again for a sponsor. I'm like, screw it, I'm going to get a sponsor. And so I get a sponsor. We drop to my knees, start praying, and I'm resisting it. I'm fighting it. This isn't how I want to get sober. This isn't working. For like, no, dude. And I go outside and I'm talking with him, and as I'm talking, he's like, so what have you kind of been through? And it's August at this point. And I'm like, I lost my dad. He killed himself in 2017. And my wife killed herself in 2015. He's like, I'm sorry about that, dude. My heart goes out to you. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. And I just started talking. He's like, dude, you don't acknowledge your loss, bro. Like, this is a problem. And started going into trauma and stuff. And he's the one that actually got me on the path to trauma therapy. So, that's why I say there's always good and bad that can kind of come from everything. It's like fishing for gold. That this was a huge gold nugget, and it wasn't necessarily, was it like, hey, go back and work the 12 steps and all this. It was like, oh my God, wait, there's trauma therapist? This is what I'm looking for. And so that was huge for me. That was a huge step of learning about trauma therapy and getting into trauma therapy. That was a big, big part of my sobriety. I struggle a lot when I see like, sobriety coaches and stuff out there. I don't necessarily agree with sobriety coaches. I do agree with, I think, rehab personally way more than I do. They're not even supposed to be called rehabs because like rehabs is for physical therapy and all this stuff. And it's like, I mean, call it whatever you want, dude. To me, it's always be a rehab, and that's fine, dude. We rehabilitate ourselves to be better human beings. But I agree with that because it's like you get a break from the world, man. You're away from your dealers and you're away from the home stress and your wives and your girlfriends. Like people don't realize like the impact of your family on like trying to get sober. Like your family, I think, is one of the biggest things that can make you relapse of, shaming you for being an addict to make you relapse or, making you think that, maybe you didn't really have an addiction. Like there's so much that families are walking on like eggshells with, I think, that like, I think it's really important for family members to learn the difference between support and enabling and how to support an addict in rehab or getting sober or an addict just, wanting to get sober versus trying to force them to get sober, all of this. And that's where I think rehab really lets you kind of get away from that. It gives you that 30 days to kind of go through that physical detox, get on maybe some of the right meds, some of the right therapy, get a support group a little bit of like some people that are maybe sober. And yes, everywhere you go, there's going to be people that aren't sober. There's going to be people going through the motions. There's going to be people relapsing. It's a part of life. But if you meet one or two like cool people, like that's what matters. And to kind of hit that reset button to be able to walk away from it all, just for a little bit to regain your bearing, I think is really, really important. And I think, people are afraid of it because it's kind of like there's a shame that goes along with it. I couldn't get sober. I had to go to rehab because you think people going to rehab, God, they're really bad, dude. What bad stuff did they do? Like you think negatively of them. And I think one of the strongest things people can do is to say I've been to rehab. That shows that somebody wanted it. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, oh, you were weak and like you were such an addict, you were so bad that you had to go to rehab. Instead, it's like people should look at it and be like, dude, you are amazing that you had the strength to go to rehab. I wish I would have went to rehab. I didn't go to rehab. If I had to get sober again, I would definitely be in rehab. I would be there. And so, I think rehabs definitely work. I think when you coach to like sobriety coaches, to me is the scariest thing because I found with a lot of sobriety coaches that they're like maybe been sober for like a year or two. And I'm all for like rooting each other on, helping each other and stuff like that. But it's like they think they found the way. And now they want to start giving out advice, which I've been there too. It's toxic as fuck. I will admit on my end, I have been very toxic in the sobriety community before. And you're trying to give out advice and you think all of a sudden like the more that you start to like give out advice and share, the more it almost feeds your ego. And you're like, I'm getting people sober, I'm saving lives. And it's bad, man. Especially when you're newer to sobriety because you don't know shit. You know a lot about nothing and nothing about a lot. And that is, I think, really the case. And you don't learn that until you kind of mature on and you look at yourself in the mirror and go, God, I was there. I did that. Because you're trying, people's lives are in your hand, man. That's why I think it's really important to get them to like places that are truly there to help, that have also the resources, that have the doctors on hand. And I mean that because like a lot of times, like even with people, they don't realize how dangerous like benzo addiction is, or when it comes to alcohol, like these detoxes can kill you. And they don't understand why. Like they don't get that, alcohol affects your central nervous system. Benzos affect your central nervous system. You can go into seizures. You can go into cardiac arrest. This affects your heart rate. This affects your blood pressure. Your central nervous system was essentially numbed and depressed, and now it's hyperactive. It doesn't go back to normal. It goes to hyperactive if it's been depressed. And that's where a lot of times getting on like medication and stuff matter. And people don't, I think, realize that. And they're just like, oh, flush all your alcohol down the toilet. No, man. Are you going into DTs? Are you starting the shakes? Like, let's get you to a detox facility. Let's get you on the right meds. You got to be safe about some of this stuff. And, just because somebody cold turkeyed it doesn't mean that's how everyone's going to do it. I know people who have cold turkeyed it off of heroin. Strong, man. I think, like, honestly, from my opinion, that's the way to go. If you can do cold turkey it, dude, because it's not going to kill you. And I've watched people push through the pain and do it. but that's not everybody's journey. You know, there's people that have gotten sober off of, you know, Suboxone. There's people that have gotten it off of even Kratom and the right MAT program. And that's what it's about. Like, we're all going to get sober different ways. And so you have to be very open-minded about that, I think, also, and not just be pushing your way is the right way in a sense, and not have that humbling, you know, oh my God, we all need to get along and we're going to be, the sobriety community is not a community. How about that? It is not a community, man. It is a bunch of people fighting for their life. And there's a part of community within everything, but it's not this close, tight-knit fucking community. It's not kumbaya. There's people going to constantly be relapsed. There's people that want to be the victim. There's people that want to be enabled, you know, and you cannot enable people. I think the personally, and this is why I think we all recover differently, I'm very black and white, man. You either want it or you don't. Like, you relapse again, okay, well, come to me when you don't want to fucking relapse anymore. Well, I don't. Do you really? Do you really? Because I was the biggest bitch, man. I was the biggest bitch getting sober. It was always poor me. It was, you know, I can't do this. And man, when I would find different recovery communities that enabled me, that were like, oh, you were just so tough, and I get how hard it is, I would play right into that, man. It's giving me something, man. It's stroking my ego. It's doing something for me. It's getting me sex. I've used, you know, my sobriety before to get laid. I mean, yes, 13 stepping is very common when it comes to AA, and it comes to any kind of sobriety. Sex is a huge part of it. You know, just trying to feel anything is a huge part of it. Like, there is no right or wrong way, but you have to protect yourself from the falseness, I think, of it, and the false sense of community. Because there are a lot of things that can set you up for, you know, being enabled and being dependent on, that you don't want to be at that place. You don't want to be that person. You have to be able to learn to be dependent on yourself. That's where I do believe a lot of sobriety apps really, really make a big difference. If you haven't downloaded Sunflower Sober, it's an app on iOS. It'll be coming out on Google soon. But download Sunflower Sober. It is an amazing app because it has a 24-hour AI sponsor. I think an AI sponsor is amazing. And people are like, well, what about a real sponsor and stuff? Dude, I know what it's like to be in NA and AA and have sponsors. Can't get a hold of them. Can't get a hold of any of my friends. It's 3 a.m, dude. Everybody's sleeping. So to be able to have like an AI, something that allows you to logically think, I think is huge, because we all know the answers. Like, a lot of times when we're fighting off relapses and stuff like this, it's not just, to me, about going to another meeting. Like, yeah, 90 meetings in 90 days is awesome, I think. And the reason that it's cool and it works is, and what it does for you is it gets you a routine going. It gets you distracted. You get around better chances of meeting sober people, building a different life, essentially, than what your addiction was. I don't think that that's going to, like, save you, though. And I think one of the big things is like learning on, you know, why do you feel you want to relapse? What's triggering? I hate the word trigger, but what's bringing up the urge to relapse? You know, is it trauma's being touched right now? Is it that, you know, you realize that there's trauma with family or whatever it might be, something that's bringing up pain that you need to numb this pain. And so to have something that you can logically communicate and talk to, I think, is really important. That's where an AI sponsor, I think, is amazing. So download Sunflower Sober if you're trying to get sober and you have an iOS phone. It is free to use, completely free to use, which blows my mind. Not maybe the best business model, but it's working right now for them. But you know, find, you know, I think apps, you know, do play a bit of a role in it. I think reading and stuff plays a bit of a role in it. You know, David Grogan's book was probably the best sobriety book I ever read. And that book wasn't even about sobriety. David Grogan's book was more about the mental aspect, because I think that's the thing, is like, when you're getting sober, so much of it is, you know, oh, those physical detox and feeling sick and going through the withdrawals and all this. But we're not talking much about, like, the pause and the mental warfare that there is. That was the hardest part for me. It wasn't the physical. My drugs of choice were alcohol and cocaine, and I went through physical withdrawals on it. You know, I really bad constipation, bathroom issues, trouble eating. I had a lot of issues when it came to, you know, just the night sweats, trying to go to sleep, just all of that. It was horrible, man. Wanting to vomit, the DTs, the shaking, and the just derealization not there. A lot of this mental things, but man, after about 30 some days though, it starts to really wear away, but then your brain kicks in. And that was the thing I just wasn't really prepared for. And a lot of things didn't prepare me for it, because it was like so set up of like 30 days, you know, that was a huge first milestone, which it is, it's a month. but it was like almost like you got brainwashed into this. Well, it's going to be better after 30 days, and that was the thing I always struggle with too. Is like that's the one thing that I struggle with. Like why I say there's not really a sobriety community is you'll talk to all these people, man, that are like 60 days sober. My life has never been better, and 90 days sober, and my life is so great. Bullshit, dude. I was like 2 years sober, and I was like, you know what? Go fuck yourself because I hate my life right now. I am 2 years sober. I have a great job. I, have all this going for me, but I am angry. I hate my life. I am struggling with depression still. Like, I'm not good, dude. So don't tell me after 30 days, 60 days that you are. And it's like we're supposed to lie to ourselves. Like if we believe it, it's going to come true. No, let's address it and work through it. Be careful of, I don't think there should be any shame to relapse. I don't think relapse has to be part of the process, but I don't think there's any shame to relapse either. I think, just because you were sober for 100 days and then you relapsed, are you still alive? That's what matters. That's where I think we miss it. Are you alive? You are. Okay, that's what matters. Do you want to go back at this? Yes. Okay, that's what matters. Not the shame all of a sudden of the more that you shame people, the more almost like you force them into a relapse, in a longer relapse, and away from getting sober, where it's like, oh, you were sober for 100 days, but now you got to throw out all your keychains and all these little things that we were doing to try and award you to help you get better. You need to come back to meetings. You need to do 90 meetings in 90 days. It's like you need to be penalized. Instead of going, hey, you were sober for 100 days. That's awesome. Like, what happened after 100 days? What came up that you couldn't handle that you had to go? Was it boredom? Like, let's go down to the stuff that we don't talk about. Were you bored? Were you lonely? These are some of the basic things that will lead us to relapse. So are we addressing them? If you're bored, let's find out how not to be bored. If you're lonely, let's find out how not to be lonely. Like let's find healthy solutions to this so the next time it happens, we have the healthy coping for it. Is it trauma? Are we going to the right trauma therapist? Are we on our meds? Did we stop our meds? What changed? Something happened. Something happened if you were sober for 100 days that got you to the point of relapsing. That's where I really struggle, and I'm so big on no right or wrong way, because if you just shame somebody constantly that you relapsed and they're sobbing that they relapsed and they lost all their soul, you didn't lose anything. That's the biggest thing that I could ever stress with people. Like, you didn't lose anything. You gained something, actually, because you gained knowledge of things that you were struggling with that weren't healed. So it comes to, find what works for you. I will always say that because, again, no right or wrong way. Then don't shame yourself for it and dig in. I think one of the big things that we don't utilize enough when getting sober, we put all this stress and belief into rehabs, and we put this stress and belief into AA and NA, into sponsors, even fucking sobriety coaches. But where's the psychiatrist and psychologist at? Because that's a huge part of it. I think that's the part that we overlook the most, in my opinion. This is just, again, my opinion, my podcast. Is that we're not digging into the traumas. I think a lot of people have a lot of trauma. I think a lot of people have a lot of grief. We're not taught how to handle trauma as kids or adults or as teens. We're not taught, hey, this was a traumatic experience in your life. You were forgotten by your parents, or you were beat by, an uncle, or whatever it might be. Like, you got to learn to work with trauma and the visceral, reflex, which is that urge to have like the rush of emotions when you talk about it, shows that it's not healed. It's how to heal from trauma, I think, is really important part of recovery. I think it's a really important part of recovery of getting onto the right meds, because let's face it, I mean, what do a lot of these drugs do? They numb us, or they take away some kind of mental pain, or they help us on some aspect that doesn't make any sense, but our brains aren't normal and our brains aren't necessarily right. I don't think that, addiction is genetic. I think the trauma is passed down through generations. I think the abuse is passed on through generations. I think the patterns aren't broken, was why they say so much of it is genes per se, rather than being actual, sickness but I think it also has to be considered a disease, because if you don't consider it a disease, you have to have insurance cover. It's not cheap to get sober sometimes. And it's saving lives. I totally agree. I don't care. Call it whatever you need to, even if you called it some kind of brain cancer, but insurance would cover it. I mean, I think that's important. People pay for insurance, and if you get it to cover it, you get it to cover it. Sweet. But I think you really have to expand on the brain side of it and the trauma side of it, along with the medication side and the grief side. There's a lot of pain in life. You lose parents at an early age, and there's a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. You lose, even losing grandparents. There's a lot of things that can happen that cause a lot of trauma. And let's face it, using numbs trauma and using numbs grief. I didn't know how to grieve my parent or my dad and my wife when they killed themselves. And I didn't realize how ADHD plays into all that. Like, there's a lot that really goes into it. It's complex, but it's not necessarily complex if you get the right help and the right explanation and then the right treatment and healing and coping and therapy. That's why CBT therapy is really important. Cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT therapy. There's EMDR. I mean, there's so much different types of therapy out there that show proven success. I think is a huge key role in getting sober rather than just raw dogging it. I mean, that's that whole mentality of, you have to raw dog it, or if you don't do NA or you don't do AA, you're not going to get sober. I think that's just a very toxic thought process behind it. I think that, whether you're spiritual or not, I think there's as many religions as there are people. And people will ask me, it's got a huge part, of your recovery, or, I only got sober because of Jesus. Good. If that's how you got sober, congratulations. That's awesome. And I won't bash that. Like, good for you. That's not me. And that's the best part, is we can all be us. Because we all have something in common. We know what it's like to be in a dark place, destroying our life, obsessed with a substance, that's the only thing that matters. We all know, we can all relate to that. So let's just have that as our common ground and not force it something more than what it should be. It doesn't have to be religion. It doesn't have to be Jesus. It doesn't have to be anything. I think that's where we mess up sometimes. Excuse me. But, finding what works for you is the key. And it can be unconventional. Like, don't look for those conventional routes. And whenever anybody says that this is the way you get sober, that scares me. Those to me are red flags when it comes to sobriety. Or, I know the way for you to get sober. That's a red flag for me in sobriety. Well, let me share all my experience and I'm going to get you sober. Like, you're not going to get anyone sober. You haven't found the right way to get sober. I mean, I look at my ways of I got sober. I did work and I had help personally with mental health rehab facilities with outpatient. Been to NA, been to AA, went psychiatrist and psychologist, medication, multiple psychologists. And that's how I got sober. There was no church. I didn't go to church. I didn't go to inpatient. That's how I got sober. I think it's a variety of different things will sometimes help people get sober. And the hard part is when we're new, we're like looking for that solution. We're looking for an easy solution, I think, because drugs is an easy solution. Take this and it goes away. So we're thinking, well, if getting high and like escaping our problems is this easy, like getting sober, there should be this easy solution to it too. And that's the problem, is there's not. The solution is, and I think that's where addiction comes into, is it's such an easy solution is what makes it so attractive. That the right way is very hard, and it's hard to find, and it's unique, and it's cultivated, and it's growing in you. And there's a lot of pain that comes along with it, of healing. But ultimately, in the long run, you're not destroying your life. You're not destroying the lives of others. You're not stealing from others. Like, you're not ruining your life. And so that's why it's so important, I think, to really keep an open mind and to remember that you evolve as you go through sobriety. I mean, there was times that even in my sobriety that, AA and NA were huge parts. Then AA was a huge part of it. Then none of it was a part of it. Then I would toy with AA some while I was doing all this other stuff with inpatient and all this other stuff. Not inpatient, excuse me, but outpatient stuff with the rehab and psychiatrists and all this. And then I would be away from it all. And then all of a sudden I'd go back and I'd start doing some AA meetings. And then I'd do multiple meetings. And then I'd go back to find a different, whatever at that time I felt I needed, I did. And I think that's one of the things that goes for everybody out there that I suggest is like, whatever you feel you need at the time, do. Whether it's at this time I need to go to AA meetings, or at this time I need to find a different psychologist, or at this time I need to talk to my psychiatrist about not using these meds and maybe looking for different meds. And I think that's where a huge part of that growth really is. Finding a lot of healthy coping tools even out there. I mean, if you go to ericbzink.com, which is my website, I'm writing a book, so I'm really excited about this book coming out. Hopefully it'll be out before summer at the end of spring. But I have a ADHD journal there for sale, and I actually use the journal. I need like to-do list. I found that this is a very healthy coping thing for me of, if I feel that I'm out of control of everything and I need the world to go silent, which sometimes used to be drugs, I can go to something as simple as a to-do list and start to organize out my day to regain control over my day where I'm not overwhelmed. And now I need to slow down this overwhelmingness. That's where so much of it is, finding out what works. Looking for a tool to aid in your recovery or looking for an app that will help you get sober, download Sunflower Sober today on iOS. It is an app that has a AI sponsor that can help you with sobriety. It has a journal. It has every tool that you need to help get sober. So download Sunflower Sober today. You'll be happy you did. In the beginning, like magnesium helps you. Like I sell Banff Wellness and Recovery magnesium glycinate, and I like magnesium glycinate over citrate. I only sell stuff that I've used. Because it helped me with the constipation. It helps you with producing natural melatonin. Like whether it's my magnesium or somebody else's, any magnesium, get magnesium into your system. Or go to ericbzink.com and get my magnesium into your system, and I donate a portion of the proceeds. But like seriously, like get magnesium into your system, get iron into your system. You probably have deficiencies in this. This helps. Cortisol levels are real when it comes to the anxiety and the depression, the fight or flight mode when you're getting sober. Yeah, ashwagandha is amazing. There's a lot of stuff out there that you can take that can help you along in the sobriety process too. And that's the thing that people don't tell you. It's so much like, it's like badges of honor for the more pain that you go through. And it doesn't have to necessarily be that way. Like I'd rather go through the pain side of like psychiatrists and psychologists and like working on my brain and like my trauma pain than the physical pain or some of the other stuff that I'm like, oh wait, though, if I took this, it makes it a little bit easier. Like that's the thing. Like if you take magnesium and lion's mane and some iron and zinc and this stuff, and you start taking care of your body, it's amazing how that helps you in your sobriety. But again, they don't teach you. And then it's like, if you're doing that too, it's like, well, watch out. That can become an addiction also. Oh, okay. What's wrong with me being then addicted to the gym in a sense? I go 5 days a week. It doesn't dictate my life. Like what? It's amazing how like when people, again, that's where I think you have to pick who you're surrounded with. Very, very important, because there's people that will pull you down. The more successful you are, the more that you start finding, joy in something else. People are more than happy to point out your flaws all of a sudden in the sobriety community per se. Oh, you're going to the gym a lot. You can't skip those meetings though, and they got to tell you how to do it. Again, don't let anyone tell you how to do it. You can ask for advice. My suggestion is ask for advice and find what works for you and your personality, because there's 5.5 billion people or something like that or on the planet that, we all are going to get sober differently. I've never ran into two people that said, hey, this is exactly how I got sober, and they're identical. Not ever. I've never ever in my life ran into two people that got sober identically. And I think that goes a long way to show you that there is no right or wrong way of getting sober. When you go, everybody's story is so different. Like I would hear some people's, I hear their sobriety stories and I'm like, were you even really an addict? And that's my personality coming out. They thought they weren't cool. Like we aren't there to diagnose anybody as an addict. I think if you feel you're an addict, then you're an addict. If you truly feel that you are cool, all right, you're an addict. If you look in the mirror and you truly don't believe you are, then no one's going to change your mind. So you're not an addict, then like, do you? But like, I meet people that I was like, man, like I wasn't a whole lot, but cool. Like you changed your life. Awesome. And then I met some people that I'm like, I don't relate, because I couldn't even imagine being high doing that stuff. Like that's not good stuff. And when I was even high and I was drunk, like I did a lot of bad stuff. Mine was more like, I never like robbed people. I stole money. I was good at that, but I would finagle people out of money as how I would steal it from them. So I felt okay. Like I would justify it. I would show them videos of my ex-wife naked, or people I was sleeping with, and I'd trade them videos for money. That was before OnlyFans. Like I would find ways to finagle money out of people, or steal money. If $100 is lying out, I'm taking the $100. You know what I mean? But I never did any robberies, any of that stuff. And I'd listen to people who did that, and I was like, man, that part of my brain just, it never connected to that level. And that's where you can't clump us all into the same room and put us all into the same system. Because you have people like myself versus people who they never stole a dime from anybody before in their life, functioning, worked well, all that, just drank a lot, whatever it might be, whatever. Versus then all of a sudden the people that were out there gangbanging, shooting up places, robbing people. We're all very different personality wise. So to say that we're all going to get sober identically, I don't believe that. And that's why I'm so big on people, expanding their brains on it, because I think the more that you expand your brain, the more that you realize that this is partially trial and error. Like there has to be just a huge desire to want to get sober. That's the biggest thing, is that desire to want to get sober has to be there. So having this desire to want to get sober is huge and is key. So once you have that and you're fighting for it, I think it's a lot easier to go through the trial and error process of, try getting a personal trainer, start being accountable to other people in life that aren't sober per se, that aren't part of this so-called sobriety community, start taking walks outside, not isolating yourself. Start finding out what works for you is the biggest key. Instead of, the people that cram down your throat that this is the only way that you can get sober and this is the only thing that will work, versus let's find out what works for you. That's a very different mindset and mentality. I think it's more of a loving and caring mindset that's not necessarily also enabling. Because I know what it's like when I'd be like, I'd hit my sponsor up for questions. This was the last time I had a sponsor. And literally, he was my sponsor for like a month, if that. Because everything he started responding, like he gave me a lot of help, man. He gave me the biggest help ever. Like got me into trauma therapy. But like after that, like he just kept sending me like videos and stuff to watch. I'm like, I'm not gonna watch an hour-long YouTube video on somebody talking about, the sixth step. Does not my thing. And that's where I think it comes down to, I got more out of watching something that made me laugh or made me go, let me try this recipe or try a new hobby than I did out of a lot of certain, things that were like so supposedly supposed to help addiction. I think that's part of the thing, is you have to find things to occupy your time. The 90 meetings in 90 days is kind of cool. I mean, yeah, it does occupy your time. It does all that, but also, are you always going to go to meetings? Like start finding other passions out there. I think the more passions and stuff that you find, whether it's like cooking or it's hiking or it's bicycling, whatever it may, working out, when you start finding these other passions, I think it makes your sobriety so much easier, because you have a life. When things start to get kind of hard, you get to go escape in something that you love to do. You get to create something, or you get to do something that you enjoy, that makes you smile, that creates natural dopamine, that exhausts you so you sleep good at night. And you said, man, today was a really bad day, but at least I went on my, 2-hour-long bike ride, whatever. I mean, that I think does a lot of help in sobriety. And again, I don't know how to get sober. I know how I got sober, but how I got sober isn't how everyone's going to get sober, and that's okay. And the best thing I did was when I realized that, because I was part of that, I know how to do this. I really struggle a lot personally still, and I block a lot of them on social media when I see them, of like sobriety coaches and all this, and my sobriety program, and I'm watching these people who are newly sober and they're like live on social media nonstop, and I'm like, dude, bro, you need to find something other than this. Like, it's cool, it's like, all right, but like from personal experience, you're going to want to find a life too. Like you got to create your life, and you can't live your life for anybody else. That's the thing with sobriety, as I found, at least for me in my sobriety, it's selfishness. I have to be selfish for me. I can't just give to everybody. I'll give when I can, but I also have to learn to be selfish and say, no, this is my time. This is Eric's time. This is my time to do what I want to do, so that I smile, that I have fun in life. Instead of just, I got to be in servitude of everybody else in this slave mentality almost. Yes, you want to give it back, but and doses, and find your own special way of giving it back. It doesn't have to be any particular way. And when I think you realize that, I think it makes a huge difference. And hopefully this helps somebody. I mean, that's the biggest thing. That's why I started doing these podcasts is I wanted to help people to just hear that real side of it. Because the hardest thing I struggle with a lot still, even in the sobriety community, is so much of this wannabe kumbaya. That's bullshit. That's like this fakeness of like, oh, we're all in this together. But God, man, if you relapse, you need to do this, 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 and this, and we're going to ridicule you, and you need to throw out all your things, and you need to tell people, you need to reset your dates, and you need to, like it's like punishment are us because you relapsed. No, there's no punishment there, dude. You're alive. That's what matters. And that's why I wanted to share on this topic, and why it fires me up some is because the more I realized that there wasn't a right or wrong way, the more it like took stress off of me. And the more that it took the pressure off of me of like, I have to do it this way. And if I don't do it this way, I failed. And when I started really doing that, it made the biggest difference to where I enjoyed my sobriety all of a sudden. I enjoyed my life all of a sudden. Like I wasn't a prisoner to my sobriety. I don't think you should ever be a prisoner to your sobriety. We're already a prisoner to our addiction. I mean, our addiction drove and dictated our life. But our sobriety doesn't have to. And our sobriety should be freeing instead of a prison all of its own. And that's the biggest key. So hopefully, again, like this helps somebody. I mean, I'm looking forward to, I'm supposed to be doing work with a rehab in Orange County, LA area. And I'm going to do a couple podcasts with them. I'll be sharing a lot more about this rehab once everything's kind of wrapped up. I'm really looking forward to that because I believe in what they're doing. And I really want to get more into sharing other people's stories too. Probably my first guest that I'm going to practice with is going to be my wife now. She actually went through withdrawals on Zoloft, which is something that I don't think like we share enough about, of like some of these SSRIs. Like people are always like, oh, you're not sober because of Adderall and all this. But then I know people who are on like antidepressants. And when you get off of these, you go through withdrawals too. And she went through withdrawals on them. She was on a really low dose too. And so I'm going to do some podcasts with her, just try off, and then start to grow it from there. If you'd love to do a podcast with me, ericbzink.com. I have submission forms there. You can fill out a form. Just put on there that you'd like to be on a podcast, what you want to share about or whatever. I'll reach out to you. I'll have one of my team members reach out to you because I like to share other people's stories than just mine. It's fun to hear somebody's story, but after a while, I want to hear other people's story. I want to hear the realness. You know what I mean? I want to hear the no bullshit nightmare, pulling yourself out of it. How did you do it? Hail Mary, made it happen when you didn't think you could. That's what I like. I don't like the hoorah, guys, together we are one. I want to, talk to family members who have lost kids to addicts and what it was like to enable them. I've had that happen personally in my life with friends of mine where they've buried their kids because, instead of letting their kid really hit rock bottom, their kids now sleeping on their couch and they're giving them some money and they have a place to live and they go buy a bag and it's laced with fentanyl and they end up dying in a parking lot because they OD'd. And then ultimately, then they're looking back, going, "Why didn't I just cut ties and let them fully hit rock bottom and gave them a better fighting chance?" I mean, that's the reality of addiction. So I do appreciate everybody who's listening to this. This podcast has definitely grown. It's definitely taken like a forefront with me. Not sure what's going to be happening with TikTok. I do a lot of TikTok content. I really enjoy TikTok, but who knows if it will be here next month, which will be January. I filmed this here right at the end of December. So hopefully TikTok's still here, but otherwise I'm still going full bore here with the podcast. And if you haven't visited my YouTube channel, it's Eric B. Zink on YouTube. I'm the Mr. Impulsive on pretty much everything, or Eric Zink. And it's all ADHD content, depression, anxiety, suicide awareness, addiction. I really enjoy sharing on that stuff. And I just want people to know that you're not alone, because I know what it's like to be like 3 a.m., man, and you're biting a pillow, trying not to sob, wondering what you're doing with your life, like massively depressed and just looking for these signs and looking for this inspiration to keep fighting and that it gets better. And it does get better. For me, it took over 5 years for it to get better. Like it got better, like nonstop, and it was like this small growth. It wasn't what everyone told me it would be then. Again, how, sobriety kind of sets you up for failure in some cases. Like you kind of wake up and like everything's back into order and even better. It was a very slow process for me over 5 years. And then finally, years 6 and 7 have been freaking amazing. And who knows, I'm probably going to have some setbacks still in life, and that's okay, because I can look back at the good years and go, these years will also keep happening too. And that is what I think keeps you fighting forward. So remember to hit that like and subscribe. Hit the 5 stars if you're leaving reviews on podcasts. I'd appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody who tunes in on these. And I can't wait to have another one come out again next week. So I will talk to you guys then. For more, go to ericbzink.com. Anything from mentoring to help to support to resources. Again, that is ericbzink.com for anything that you need for any of the struggles that you're going through.